Missing. Wanted. The unexplained. Murder. Searching for the truth. From the cold case files with Wayward Legacy. Picture yourself in this situation. You grow up in a small town with a loving family. Everyone you meet takes a liking to you instantly. You have many friends and people who care for you. You make your way through school, easing your way through academics. You excel at your most favorite sport, helping your team to championship glory. You already have your career path mapped out. You write down all your goals and dreams. You eventually reach those dreams. Things are good, and the world is bright. However, on one June early morning, that light dims, and the bright world you once knew turns dark at the hands of a monster lurking within the shadows. This case is the abduction of Jodi Huisentruit. Jodi was born on June 5th, 1968. She was the youngest of 3 girls born to Maurice and Jane Huisentruit. She was close to her older sisters, Joanne and Jill. Her mother, Jane, would affectionately call her Teddy Bear, a nickname worthy for someone who was so happy and warm to everyone like Jodi was. The family suffered the first of what would be 2 tragedies when Jodi's father passed away when she was only 13 years old. However, Jodi was strong and battled on through her sadness and grief to accomplish the goals she set out on. Jodi attended Long Prairie High School in Long Prairie, Minnesota, her childhood hometown. Jodi's friends, peers, and teachers described her as highly energetic, athletic, and popular. She was also described as ambitious, outgoing, with a prank-loving personality. She was an active member of the student council and a rifle commander in the band program. Jodi was a highly skilled athlete. She played basketball and softball. However, her true calling was golf, the sport where she excelled at the most. Jodi and her team won the state Class A championship in 1985 and 1986. Jodi told her friends and peers her dream was to become a famous news anchor. After high school, Jodi attended St. Cloud State University, where she would graduate in 1990 with a degree in mass communications and speech communication. Her first job after college was working as a flight attendant for Northwest Airlines. In 1991, Jodi began her broadcasting career, working at CBS affiliate KGAN, where she worked as the station's Iowa City bureau chief, covering the local and state news. She would later return to her home state of Minnesota to work for ABC affiliate KSAX. It was there where she became a highly skilled reporter and news anchor. In 1993, Jodi returned to the state of Iowa, taking a job in Mason City to work at CBS affiliate KIMT TV. Doug Murbach, Jodi's former news director, described her as bright, and her engaging on-air personality made the viewers who let her into their homes each fall in love with the blonde's work and personality, along with her bright smile. Her co-workers stated she never made the news about herself and was dedicated to uplifting others. They also described her as independent and tended to keep her social circle out of the newsroom. Jodi was the lead morning news anchor, where she anchored the morning and noon news broadcasts. It was a job she worked proudly, up until her very last broadcast on June 26, 1995, a day before she was abducted. Mason City, Iowa is a small town with a population of 28,000 people. It's 120 miles north of Des Moines and 135 miles south of Minneapolis. It's also been called the River City. It's known for its musical heritage and prairie school architecture. Mason City is the hometown of Meredith Willson. He wrote the Broadway play The Music Man, based on being raised in Mason City. The city also features a replica 1912 streetscape from the movie, which featured Wilson's childhood home. It's also known for another tragedy, the 1959 plane crash which killed Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, and Richie Valens, which crashed in a field outside the city after the trio performed in nearby Clear Lake. After leaving her job at KSAX, Jodi packed up her things and moved to Mason City in 1993. Jodi signed a 2-year contract with KIMT. She had begun working there soon after. The contract was set to expire in the fall of 1995. When Jodi got into town, she went to her new home, the Key Apartments, located at 600 North Kentucky Avenue. She settled in quickly at her new home and began working at KIMT. During her time there, Jodi kept up with the intense routine of waking up at 3 in the morning to get ready and prepare for the morning show, Daybreak. Jodi became a popular figure in Mason City. She was well liked by her co-workers and adored by the community. The energetic, upbeat blonde had certainly left her mark on the town. Outside of her work, Jodi would often play golf, playing in many local events. She was highly passionate about the sport, going back to her high school years. In and out of the newsroom, Jodi was known for her vibrant charisma. She was optimistic, warm, and caring to many. Her infectious personality lit up the world around her. She was highly social, visible, and approachable. She made sure to make an effort to be completely embedded in the community. She was well known to lift others up. She often attended local sporting events. Jodi made a wide circle of friends, one of them being a man named John Van Sice. Jodi and John met shortly after she moved to Mason City. Van Sice lived in the Key Apartments at the time, but later moved out, long before Jodi's abduction. John was 20 years older than Jodi. He described their relationship as a father-daughter dynamic, which made sense, as Jodi had been without a father since her father's passing when she was only 13 years old. Their friendship deepened over time through shared interests, such as boating and water skiing. Van Sice reportedly named his boat after her. However, it was not the official name, nor was it painted on the back. It was something only between the two friends. This fact prompted speculation that John had deeper feelings for Jodi than he let on. However, he disputed these claims, furthering he only looked at her as a friend and daughter, that there were no romantic feelings between the two. Van Sice stated he was dating another woman during the time he knew Jodi, but the relationship had not been made public at the time. It was unknown if Jodi had a steady boyfriend, though private investigators uncovered she had a secret fling with an out-of-state man she met 10 days before her abduction. The two were in daily contact. As 1995 came, Jodi's life and routine continued to go on like it had been. With her contract set to expire in the fall, she had been actively preparing to apply to jobs in larger markets like the Twin Cities in Minnesota. It was now June of 1995. Jodi's birthday was on June 5th. A few days later, she purchased a red Mazda Miata. Some claims are that Jodi bought the car herself. However, private investigator Steve Ridge indicated John Van Sice said Jodi had got the car from a married man, that she didn't intend on keeping the vehicle, and planned on giving it back. Which story is true, I cannot confirm, though both are quite believable, given that Jodi was a very independent woman, as well as her popularity among the town. 5 days later, on June 10th, Van Sice and other friends threw a birthday party at Sully's, a bar on Highway 18 in Clear Lake. Later that night, Jodi stayed at John's house and slept on his couch. On June 12th, Jodi and John went to a Glenn Miller Orchestra in Belmont. A few days later, on June 17th, Tammy Barker, Jodi's close personal friend, whom she met while working at KGAN in 1992, was staying at her apartment. They went water skiing with John and went dancing later on that evening. PI Steve Ridge believes that this was the date that Jodi met the mystery man, which could be considered the start of a new relationship. On the weekend of June 24th, Jodi, Tammy, and John spent the weekend at John's son's home in Iowa City for a weekend of water skiing. On Monday, June 26th, 1995, Jodi anchored what would be her final news broadcast from 6 to 7 in the morning. Later that morning, at 9 a.m., Jodi attended the Mason City Chamber of Commerce golf tournament fundraiser at Highland Park Golf Course. She was playing in the tournament with a team consistent of 2 local businessmen and a KIMT TV sales associate. The team played until it started raining. The group retreated to the clubhouse and chatted for a while, till around the afternoon, when Jodi went home to change her clothes. She later returned at 3:30 p.m. She socialized for a while, and then had dinner later on. A couple of the members on Jodi's team stated that Jodi had told them she had been receiving annoying phone calls and had planned on changing her number. At 8 p.m., Jodi said her goodbyes to her team and her news director, Doug Murbach, before she left to go home. 24 minutes later, Jodi phoned her friend, Kelly Torgerson, who lived in Mississippi. Kelly wasn't home at the time, so Jodi spoke briefly with Kelly's husband. Kelly's husband noted that Jodi didn't sound worried or afraid at all, but she sounded cheerful. It's not clear how the rest of Jodi's night went. However, John Van Cise told police she had came by to watch the videotape of her birthday at his home. It was Monday, June 27th. Jodi normally arrived at work at that time for the morning news. Amy Coons, Jodi's producer at KIMT, called her at 4 a.m. Amy stated everything sounded normal, like she had just woken Jodi up. She asked Amy what time it was, and Amy responded that it was around 4 a.m. Amy said it seemed that Jodi was aware that she had overslept and that she had needed to come in for work. Amy said everything sounded normal, and she heard nothing out of the ordinary. The drive from Jodi's apartment to the station was only 5 minutes. It wouldn't take long to arrive. However, 5 a.m. came, and Jodi still had not shown up. Amy tried to call again, but Jodi didn't answer. By 6 a.m., Jodi still hadn't came into work. Amy did the news herself, and then asked a co-worker to call the police. She was worried that Jodi may have possibly fallen and injured herself in some way. 13 minutes later, after 7 a.m., the MCPD got a call from a KIMT director for a welfare check on Jodi. 3 minutes later, at 7:16, an officer arrived at the Keys apartment. The officer indicated it was clear a crime had just taken place there. Jodi's red Mazda Miata was only a few steps away from the building. The area was in complete disarray. There was clear signs of a struggle. Drag marks were on the pavement, as well as a bent car key. Jodi's red heels, a blow dryer, and earrings were strewn around her car. A partial prom print was found on the vehicle. The cops checked her apartment, and everything seemed normal inside. Neighbors told police they heard a scream around 4:30, but no one called to notify them. Later that morning, John Van Cise had told police he had been the last person to see Jodi before her disappearance the previous evening at his home when she went there to watch the videotape. Later on, a man who lived up the street from the building claimed he had seen a light-colored van that morning as he drove to work. The van has never been located. Hours later, search teams were assembled, and the area was searched. The search soon stretched to 2, 5, 10 miles, and then eventually hundreds. National news crews came to the small town. The search for the missing news anchor was on, and the investigation was kicked into high gear. The MCPD later gathered evidence from the Key Apartments parking lot. Jodi's red Mazda Miata was towed and taken into police custody for analysis. It was soon after this that the search began. On the first day it was raining. A few days later, when it subsided, the search took place along the Winnebago River. MCPD Lieutenant Ron Vanderweer recalls the search, saying they searched along the riverway, and that the search parties were soon organized. All those who knew Jodi were constantly keeping up with the search. Her producer, Doug Murbach, recalls he was out golfing, trying to take a break from everything, when a helicopter flew over the golf course. It was reminded that the search was still ongoing, and Jodi was still missing. The search spread like wildfire, garnering national attention. The white van was a massive clue in the case. The same model was shown on many news stations at the time. Over time, tips continued to come in. Investigators, dogs, and volunteers searched every tip and lead. Though as the months went on, they were nowhere closer to finding Jodi. As a result of this, the family sought out many private investigators over the years. The most recent one is Steve Ridge, who has followed the case since 1995 and started actively working it in 2019. Now, before I get into talking about John Van Cise, I will say some research on him comes from the book Dead Air by Beth Bednar. The Find Jodi team does not reference it or its conclusions. The Huisentruit family also has criticized it, saying the book was written to profit off the case and was a hurtful character assassination based on unproven claims. Steve Ridge has also criticized the book, talking about its unconfirmed speculation and assumptions that are presented as fact. I will not go into these claims. Instead, I will focus on what is fact based on the Huisentruit files, Steve Ridge, and factual information that has been covered from before. As noted, John Van Cise was a good friend of Jodi's. The two had a father-daughter type relationship, though some speculate there may have been more of an attraction to Jodi from John's side, though again, he always disputed that. Van Cise was the prime suspect by police from the very beginning, with John himself referring to himself as such. Amy Coons, Jodi's friend and co-worker at KIMT, said John phoned KIMT on the morning of Jodi's abduction. The call occurred between 7:15 and 7:20, after police had arrived at the Key apartments. It was a rare occurrence, Amy said. This was the only time he had ever called there. He asked if Jodi was there, and could he talk with her. Amy replied that Jodi hadn't shown up. John asked if Jodi was sick. Amy responded that she didn't know, and that Jodi just hadn't shown up. He continued to ask what was wrong. Amy responded, telling him she didn't know, and she had to go, as she had to anchor the morning news. Van Cise later went to the apartment and talked with police, telling them about the previous night at his home, as well as their close relationship. These two facts was what made him a prime suspect in the police's eyes. John took part in the search, and continued to cooperate with investigators. Jodi's sister Joanne noted that she felt uncomfortable while having breakfast with John and others one day after Jodi disappeared. She asked John if Jodi had ever mentioned her dad. He responded in a very cold and unfriendly tone that Jodi never mentioned her dad, and shoved his chair back. Joanne later questioned John's true feelings for Jodi, whether he thought of her as just a friend, or perhaps something more. Joanne claimed she had heard otherwise, that Van Cise had wanted more of a relationship with her. Tammy Baker, Jodi's friend, later asked Jodi if the two were involved. She responded, absolutely not. John Van Cise continued to work with the investigators for a while, though as the case grew cold, they hadn't heard from him in years. He later moved from Mason City to Arizona, where he eventually got remarried. Van Cise later returned to Iowa after being subpoenaed in May of 2019 to provide DNA and fingerprints. At the time, he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Also around that time, Steve Ridge also met with John, where he conducted several interviews, making notes and recording of those interviews. Steve said John and his wife were very cooperative and lovely people to deal with. In 2024, John Van Cise later passed away at the age of 78. In early 2025, Steve Ridge and attorneys later filed a motion in court to open a 2017 search warrant that tracked GPS data on Van Cise's vehicles. However, nothing was found by this warrant. Ridge later stated since Van Cise had passed away and nothing had panned out of the 2017 search, that his family deserved to have the suspicion cleared. Now, it is my general belief that Van Cise was not involved. In my opinion, the reason why he called KIMT that day was perhaps he had driven by the Key apartments. Perhaps he had seen police, and he was concerned for his friend, so that's why he called KIMT and asked if Jodi was there. And that's why he was so pushy in trying to find out what happened, and if Amy knew anything. And then I think the next day at breakfast, when he was cold and very unfriendly towards Joanne, perhaps that was just out of anger and frustration of not being able to find his friend that he cared for so much. And so, in my opinion, I don't think he was involved. I think the two were just very good friends. Maybe he had an attraction to her. Jodi was a very beautiful woman. You know, I think anybody would be attracted whether they were friends or not, but I think he respected that she didn't want anything more than just friendship with him, and so he didn't act on that. So in my opinion, I don't think he was involved in it. I think he was just a concerned friend, and that's why he reacted to it the way that he did. I think if he was involved, he wouldn't have been so cooperative with the investigation and continued to work with investigators and PIs over the years. So, yeah, in my opinion, I don't believe he was involved in it. And now I will get into other suspects that were later cleared. Thomas Korskadin was another man investigated by police. He was a native of Austin, Minnesota, with a rap sheet of sexual offenses going back 25 years. He regularly traveled to Mason City for work during the time of the abduction. Later on the Find Jodi podcast, Korskadin's daughter was interviewed. She noted Korskadin frequently watched Jodi on television. He was aware of her and possibly had an obsession with the blonde anchor. In 2004, investigators searched a farm belonging to a friend of Korskadin's. They dug up a fire pit and searched the farm. Yet no trace of Jodi was ever found. Later that year, forensic teams compared his prints to the unidentified print on the Miata. It wasn't a match, and he was officially ruled out as a suspect. Tony Jackson was another person of interest. He lived 2 blocks away from KIMT and a mile away from the Key Apartments. Jackson was later arrested for violent sexual assaults in the Twin Cities. He was later convicted. While awaiting his conviction, he shared a cell with another inmate. This inmate claimed Jackson admitted to murdering a news anchor. The inmate recited rap lyrics, which contained cryptic hints about a body being hid in a silo in Tiffin, a town 2 hours away from Mason City. Investigators followed this lead and went to the site with dogs in 1998. However, no remains were ever found. Police never found any physical evidence or DNA linking Tony Jackson to Jodi's abduction. He was eventually cleared and ruled out. Jackson continued to maintain his innocence, saying he never met Jodi or traveled to the locations the informant named. Jackson later participated in the 2025 docuseries by Hulu and ABC Studios, Her Last Broadcast, where he gave an interview from Stillwater Correctional Facility. Jackson noted he would be spending the rest of his life in prison based on his crimes. He said people deserve to know what happened to Jodi. Jackson would admit he wanted to be a father at the time, and after his girlfriend had a miscarriage, it took him to a very dark place. This dark place was what snapped something inside of him. This was where his string of violent sexual assaults began. Jackson noted after the assaults he would feel bad, though he couldn't stop, as the assaults were filling the void from the pain he felt at the time. Jackson said after the last assault, he felt horrible about it, and prayed to God to stop him, as he no longer wanted to do these assaults any longer. It was shortly after this that he was arrested. Jackson continued saying he had nothing to do with Jodi's abduction, and that he has done everything in his power to help police and cooperate within the last 30 years to have his name cleared. Jackson later said to detectives that he knew he was spending the rest of his life in prison, and that he had no reason to not tell them whether or not he was involved. Jackson later said he wants to see this case resolved and Jodi be brought home. It's in my opinion that Tony had nothing to do with this case. He seems very remorseful for his crimes, and I believe if he had anything to do with Jodi's abduction, he would tell investigators. There has also been a theory that Frank Stearns, the former chief of police at the MCPD, who worked on Jodi's case in 1995, and other officers were involved as well in her disappearance. This stems from an anonymous phone call in 2007 to Reverend Shane Philpott. This man claimed to have information on Jodi's abduction, claiming she had been murdered by officers of the MCPD and that there was a cover-up. Because of this, the man did not want to speak to police. Shane gave this information to Officer Maria Ohl, who is his sister-in-law. She gave him advice, which prompted him to talk to some of the higher-ups in the MCPD. A month later, he was told by a department captain that this info was not credible and would not be investigated. In 2009, Pastor Philpott and his church would sue the city and the police chief for defamation after the MCPD made false statements to the IRS. The IRS later cleared the pastor, and he was awarded $85,000 in the settlement. It was later found out that the MCPD had admitted an official record of the 2007 calls regarding Jodi's case. In 2010, during a deposition, Maria Ohl brought up the case tip and missing records. Because of this, the police chief shut down the deposition. Maria later went public, claiming multiple officers and high-ranking officials covered up evidence, and that the informant noted Jodi had been buried in a nearby Forest City sawmill. Ohl was later fired for insubordination, as well as mishandling evidence after keeping duplicate recordings. The Iowa DCI released a statement saying there was no credible evidence linking officers to Jodi's disappearance. It is in my opinion the cops were not involved. However, one could go with the theory, if they were involved, that perhaps it was possible. Perhaps Jodi could have been working on a story involving police corruption. Though again, I do not believe the MCPD were involved at all. I believe it's possible the pastor kept coming to police to look into the informant's claims. Perhaps that's why they gave false claims to the IRS, in order to stop the pastor and Ohl from going public with the claims, and muddying the investigation. While it's strange of them to do that, perhaps that was their reasoning for it. The bottom line is, I do not believe Frank Stearns or any officer at the MCPD had anything to do with Jodi's abduction. Chris Revac is another person of interest who was featured on the Hulu series Her Last Broadcast. He was a former EMT and suspected serial killer who was charged and arrested for second-degree murder for the 2007 disappearance of 36-year-old Renee Williams, a bartender and mother of 3 who went missing after her shift at the Eagles Lodge in Ava, Missouri. His DNA was discovered at the crime scene, and Renee's DNA was inside his truck. Revac's wife later told police he had forced her to help him load Renee's body into his truck, where he would kill her too. One day after his arrest, Revac took his own life. He was also later found responsible for the 2006 cold case murder of 21-year-old Deirdre Haim, who went missing after a night out with friends. Her remains were found months later by hunters. Financial records, phone data, and witnesses confirmed that Revac was in town on the weekend that she disappeared. The Mason City Police Department are currently looking into the possibility of Revac being involved in Jodi's disappearance. Chris Revac had a girlfriend who lived in Mason City back in 1995. Revac's girlfriend lived in the very same duplex as John Van Cise. The duplex is located at 510 6th Street Southeast. This is one of the biggest coincidences in this case. Sheriff Chris DeGase of the Douglas County Police Department, who worked on the Renee Williams case, stated that he does not believe in coincidences, and noted the similarities between Jodi and Renee. Chris Revac's girlfriend moved to Mason City shortly after the two broke up. He stayed in Grand Rapids. His girlfriend was not living in Mason City at the time of Jodi's disappearance. She moved out of the duplex in March of 1995, a whole 3 months before Jodi's abduction. There's a theory that Revac may have been looking for or possibly stalking his ex, which if he was, it was more than likely he would have laid eyes on Jodi, given her close relationship with John Van Cise. She would have visited the duplex often, including on the night before she vanished. Revac's girlfriend later stated he never showed up while she lived in Mason City, but always wondered if he ever got a hold of her address. Police reports put Revac in Wisconsin Rapids on June 17th and July 9th of 1995. However, where he was in between these dates is unknown. As of right now, there is no way to determine whether or not Revac was in Mason City at the time of Jodi's abduction. As of right now, they are still looking into this, and he is still a person of interest. In my general opinion, I do not believe he was involved. However, the similarities are there, and it's very intriguing that his ex-girlfriend lived at the same address as John Van Cise. I've always been under the impression that Jodi's abduction was by someone who knew her and her routine, that the abduction was out of jealousy. I don't believe this was a random attack by someone who didn't know her. While it's certainly possible Revac could have stalked Jodi for months and then abducted her, he didn't strike me as a killer with patience and a plan, so it's my belief he was not involved. The stalker theory is the theory that many people, including myself, lean into. There are some who believe it was an obsessed fan, others who believe it was due to a story Jodi had been working on, or, such as the theory I lean into, it was someone who knew her. Jodi had reported being stalked on October 8, 1994. She called the Mason City Police Department. She reported that a driver who was driving a new small white pickup truck had been following her near the Key Apartments. Within 15 minutes, an officer responded, and the situation was handled. The driver was not identified. Neighbors later told police, 2 days before her abduction, of a chilling incident where an unidentified man was pounding on the door of Jodi's apartment, yelling to come out and that he knew she was in there. Whether she was in the apartment or not that day is unknown. As noted before, Jodi had also told her golf team about calls she had been receiving just 1 day prior to her abduction. There was no mention of the man pounding on the door, though I do believe it happened. Again, I do believe it was by someone she knew, and I will elaborate further on this after talking about the next person of interest. Brad Miliband is another person of interest who is heavily featured on the Hulu documentary Her Last Broadcast. Patty Niermeyer, Jodi's childhood friend and Brad's ex-wife, was watching a 2020 special on Jodi's case. Patty said while watching it, she had heard many details that she hadn't heard before. It was then that she sent an email to the Mason City Police Department and urged them to look into her ex-husband. Patty recalled when Brad had called her on the 10-year anniversary of Jodi's abduction, that she questioned why he was calling her, and that the call had freaked her out. The two had not spoken in between the time they split up and the time of the call. In 1995, Brad lived in Winstead, Minnesota, which is 3 hours away from Mason City, a place he frequently traveled to for work. Patty said she is 100% positive Brad met with Jodi. She later recalled, Brad would often ask about Jodi, which she said looking back on it is another red flag. Patty later says she remembers Brad's work van being a white Econoline van. The same type of van was the same kind spotted at Jodi's apartment on the morning she was abducted. She recalled Brad having a drinking problem, as well as anger issues when he drank. Two things which made Patty believe Brad could also be involved. Police working on the case say they have composites of a man lurking around on a bridge across from the Key Apartments, 2 days before Jodi's abduction. The man was described as carrying a bag and acting odd, that he was just staring at the Key Apartments. This information was not revealed up until last year. Patty was then shown the sketches of the man and asked what she had seen. Patty said she saw the face of her ex-husband, Brad Miliband. Brad and Patty were married in February of 1994 at the Mall of America. On that day was a Valentine's Day radio stunt where dozens of couples were married there. Brad was later introduced to Jodi. Stacy Steinman, another friend of Jodi's, recalls sitting at the table and seeing Brad being enamored with Jodi. Brad's co-worker, Paul Herbolsheimer, said the two built cheese processing equipment, and Brad was a salesman, and said the two men often traveled for work, that they would often do business outside of Mason City. Paul recalled a time where he came into work where Brad was watching a news broadcast about Jodi's abduction. This was where Brad told Paul he knew Jodi. Paul later would state it was very likely that the two were traveling before the time Jodi went missing. Patty would later say she was sure that Brad may have met with Jodi. She would go on to speak about his drinking problem, saying he would often start in the morning. Brad and Patty would later separate in December of 1994. Their divorce papers were signed on June 23rd of 1995, just a few days before Jodi's abduction. Sergeant Terrence Chaska of the Mason City Police Department contacted Brad in 2022. He stated Brad was very cooperative and friendly, and that he admitted to owning a white van, and one time, he had went to Mason City to pick Jodi up. Brad obtained Jodi's info and contacted her. It was then that he called her, and the two met up. He took her for dinner around the fall of 1994. On June 5th of 1995, Jodi indicated to Patty that Brad had tried to contact her. This was just weeks before she was abducted, and that Patty and Brad's divorce was finalized. In 2024, Sergeant Prochaska later met with Brad, and the two began an interview. Prochaska said Brad was cooperative, but also seemed very nervous. The two would go into his marriage with Patty as well as his interactions with Jodi, which Brad described as very limited. Prochaska would bring up that a man matching Brad's description was seen outside the Key Apartments a few days before Jodi's abduction. He noted to Brad that with this info, it was hard to believe that Brad's recollection of last seeing Jodi was in October of 1994. Prochaska later said, this statement, Brad sat back and sat there in silence. Prochaska would later present the timeline of Brad's divorce finalizing, the man being seen outside the Key Apartments, and Jodi's abduction. There was no reaction from Brad. He had no questions. He just sat there in a dazed and glazed over look. Yet when Prochaska asked Brad about the white van, or maybe the license plate of his van possibly being seen that day, it was that Brad's mouth started twitching uncontrollably. It was this action that Prochaska took a break and brought Brad some water, and within a couple of minutes, he drank the whole bottle. He became very nervous at this point in the interview. The interview lasted 90 minutes. Prochaska indicated it was during these questions that Brad was like a ghost, and that this was very concerning to him. He noted during the interview Brad asked no questions at all during the interview. Brad later gave DNA to police. Cops later searched an area behind Brad and Patty's old house a couple of days after the interview. However, nothing was found in this area. Brad later agreed to take a polygraph. Sergeant Prochaska said, while he couldn't give the results of the polygraph, he noted Brad was very cooperative during it. It is in my opinion that Brad Milburn had something to do with Jodi's abduction. In looking at his past, he traveled to Mason City often for work. He seemed to have an attraction towards Jodi, and as noted earlier, admitted to meeting up with her for dinner. He also continued to try and contact her in June of 1995. The timeline of the events, as well as the witness composite matching Brad, are two things that really stick out to me. There were also Coors Light beer cans lined up outside a dumpster that was overlooked by Jodi's window. My theory, if Brad was involved, perhaps on the night that the man was spotted, it was Brad going there to see Jodi. In Jodi's apartment, it looked as though she may have had male company that night. Maybe that night was the night that the mystery man was there, and Brad saw that. He later got divorced from Patty on the 23rd. Maybe it's possible Brad had a relapse of his alcoholism. On the morning of Jodi's abduction, with his divorce finalizing, Jodi not talking to him and seeing her with another man drove him back to drinking. And perhaps he was the one who abducted her that morning. I've always said from the beginning of looking into this case that Jodi's attacker was someone who knew her. I believe Brad's attraction to Jodi, his past with alcohol, and the timeline of events are all keys to look at, as well as Brad matching the composite. I also believe his behavior during the interview was strange. However, he was cooperative with police the entire time. Whether he's guilty or not is unknown. I believe until he's fully proven innocent, Brad Milburn is definitely a person of interest, worth looking into heavily. The mystery man Jodi had been dating just days before her abduction was thoroughly investigated by police as a possible person of interest. The Mason City Police Department discovered the relationship between the two early on in the investigation. They later tracked the man down and asked him about his whereabouts at the time of Jodi's abduction. They conducted several extensive interviews with the man. After checking his alibi, as well as finding no evidence linking the man to the Key Apartments parking lot on the day of the abduction, the Mason City Police Department officially ruled him out as a suspect. The identity of this man is still unknown. However, Private investigator Steve Ridge met with the man to talk about his relationship with Jodi. Earlier on this month, Steve Ridge noted there may have been a possibility that the man stayed at Jodi's apartment shortly before she vanished, given that there were wine glasses in her sink, as well as the toilet seat being up. Many have looked at this fact over the years that they believe that Jodi's abductor was the one who stayed at her apartment that night. However, this can be disputed. With Jodi's work at KIMT, her social life, as well as being heavily involved in the community, she was always constantly on the go. It's very possible, with her schedule being the way that it was, she hadn't had a whole lot of time to pick up her apartment in between the time the man was there and her abduction. Ridge also would explicitly state his stance on the mystery man not being involved in the crime. Ridge would go on to speak about their relationship, saying the man was incredibly infatuated with Jodi during their 10-day romance. The connection between the two grew quickly. The two called each other daily, went on dinner and golf dates. It was more than just a fling. The man stated he had high hopes for the relationship, and he envisioned a long-term future with Jodi. Ridge also indicated he has narrowed down the suspect list to 4 people. Ridge spoke to a new eyewitness, a woman in her 80s who claimed a man she had dated just months after Jodi's abduction had confessed to the crime. The woman recalled a time where the two were driving and they were being tailed by police. The man slammed his steering wheel in frustration, saying, "I didn't do it, I didn't do it," before slamming the steering wheel one hard final time, saying, "I did it." The two broke up shortly after this. The woman backed up her claims by providing letters, photos, and canceled checks. Steve refused to name the suspect or confirm whether or not he was still alive. Ridge later compiled his evidence and submitted it to the Iowa DCI. Many believe the identity of this man to be John Van Cise, though it would be odd that Steve Ridge would not want to reveal that. Perhaps he won't, because he doesn't have enough evidence to fully say that this was the guy who abducted Jodi. Even with my own theory of Van Cise not being involved, it is an interesting theory to look into. Van Cise was reportedly dating another woman at the time. When looking at this new evidence and potential suspect, it's difficult for me to give a full opinion and analysis on this new info. While I do think the story is believable, there are also many holes within it. There's also just not enough background on it to really dive into it or come up with a possible theory on it. Perhaps in time, more will come to light, and I will be able to give a better opinion on it. With many leads and theories not panning out, I feel that that's the best option to go with right now. As noted in this part of the video, there have been many suspects in this case. John Van Cise is still the likely one for many, including Jodi's friend and co-worker, Amy Coons, who noted John's behavior before and after Jodi's disappearance. Whether or not John Van Cise was involved or not is still unknown. Whatever the truth is, Van Cise took it with him to his grave. Brad Millerburn is the other likely suspect, with his past behavior, as well as his attraction to Jodi, his likeness matching the composite, and nervousness when being questioned by police. Both men continue to cooperate with the investigation, and neither one's guilt has yet to be proven. The question remains, was either one of these men responsible? Or was the man who abducted Jodi Huisentruit on the morning of June 27th someone the police have not discovered? For now, the true identity remains unidentified. Cold cases are always tragic, whether it's a missing persons case or a murder mystery. The investigation process is long. There are many questions to answer, suspects to investigate, and leads to uncover. The tragic parts of these cases are the family members left to grieve and try to seek answers, as well as what happened to their loved one. I truly believe one day we will have an answer as to what happened to Jodi. 31 years later, tips and leads are still coming in. There have been many cold cases over the years which have become solved, such as the Boston Strangler, or in more recent times, the original Night Stalker and Gilgo Beach Killer. These are 3 cases which went unsolved for years that some felt would never be solved. All it takes is that one piece of crucial evidence or a tip to complete the pieces to these complex puzzles. I believe as long as investigators continue to work hard at this case, and that people continue to cover it to keep it out there, one day, every question will be answered, and this case will be solved. It's been 31 years since Jodi went missing. All these decades later, investigators as well as her family are still searching for answers as to what happened to her. In those 31 years, their hope has never wavered. Jodi's case has been covered extensively since 1995. With the internet becoming more prominent in the decades since, her story has continued to be told. Television shows such as America's Most Wanted and Unsolved Mysteries have covered her case, along with many documentaries, podcasts, and YouTube videos. Jodi's story is more known now than it ever has been, and with this fact, it's inevitable that someday the many questions in this case will be answered. Jodi was legally declared dead in May of 2001. A couple years later, in 2003, the website findjodi.com was launched by Minnesota TV journalists Gary Peterson and Josh Benson. The website was launched to help keep Jodi's case in the spotlight. As the years have gone on, it's now grown into a non-profit organization, which is ran by volunteers who produce podcasts, original reporting, and an entire case log of information. Much of the info and pictures in this video came from findjodi.com. Sadly, Jodi's mother Jane passed away in December of 2014 at the age of 91, without ever finding a resolution to this case or being able to lay Jodi to rest. However, Jodi's family and many of her friends keep up hope and are still actively involved in the investigation of this case. Jodi Huisentruit's abduction will always be a dark memory in Mason City's history. It was this case which made the small town realize its vulnerability. KIMT TV still operates today. Jodi's station hasn't changed that much within the last 31 years. The newsroom still looks as much as it did when she sat in it to deliver the morning news to the people of Mason City. However, newscasts are no longer live from Mason City. Everything is based from Rochester, Minnesota today. In 2024, Jodi's family started a Facebook page called Jodi's Hope to show more of the human side of Jodi, which I believe is very important when covering these types of cases. Like so many others, Jodi was much more than a missing person, more than a statistic, more than a victim. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and an overall good person. She was a small-town girl with big dreams and plans, which she was able to accomplish some of them in her 27 years before that dark morning on June 27, 1995. For as much darkness that surrounds this story, there is as much goodness and light that Jodi still brings to those that knew her and to those who continue to learn about her story. For as beautiful as Jodi was even more of a beautiful person. And that's how she should be remembered. As a small-town girl from Long Prairie, Minnesota, who truly left an impact on everyone who knew her, and certainly left her mark on the world. If you have any information about this case, contact the Mason City Police Department, and if you would like to know more about Jodi's case, or Jodi herself, follow Jodi's Hope on Facebook, or visit findjodi.com. Hopefully soon, this case can be resolved. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, and again, thanks for watching. And before I get any more further into this part of the video, I just want to say you may hear some interference from sound, as I've said in the last video, or the last couple videos I did. Obviously, with the summer months being here, my AC is on, and I'm sitting directly under it, so you may hear some interference from that. Hopefully it won't be too bad. In the last few videos that I've done, you can kind of hear it in the background, but I could still hear myself, and it's not too loud. And when I was recording the audio parts of these videos, I was using this headphone, or these headphones, and I couldn't hear that, so hopefully that won't impact it again. But when I was doing that part, I wasn't directly under it like I am now, so hopefully that doesn't impact this too much. But I did just want to say, if you do hear anything, that's what that is. And I mean, it doesn't stay on for long. It kind of kicks on and off, and yeah. But again, I do want to say thank you for watching the video, and just know I worked really hard on it. I've spent probably the last couple weeks really diving deep into this case, trying to find everything that I possibly can, because it was 10 years ago on this day of the 20th or 21st anniversary, I guess at the time, in 2016 when I did this video. And I looked back at this video, at that video recently, probably before I did this one, and I thought to myself, like, it just really wasn't that good of a video. Like back then, I was reading stuff from Unsolved Mysteries, the wiki, and just like reading what was off there. And at that time, I was like 22, I think, 22, 23. I think I was 22. And I didn't have the confidence when I started doing this like I do now. I mean, I still struggle with talking, and I'm not the best at it, but I try, and I think I'm a lot better than what I used to be. But yeah, I just looked at that video and I thought it wasn't that good, and I wanted to redo this case, and because it's always been one of those cases that have stuck with me. And I actually did another case originally, and again, as you can see, I talked about editing and stuff like that, right? So that's what I did with this video, and I did that with the last video. And I listened to it back, and I think it was maybe 9 minutes plus me talking in front of the camera, so that added a bit more time to it. And I listened to it back, and I was like, I really don't like the way that it was put together. I thought I could have did a little bit more of a better job with it. So I uh, I decided to do this case instead. And I mean, even this video is not perfect, and this is the first time I've ever done any kind of editing, and I've looked some kind of stuff up on it. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I mean, as you can tell, there's some parts in the video where I'm a bit more louder, some where I'm a bit more quieter, and the music gets a bit more louder. There was other times that I did multiple takes, and I was kind of talking a little bit more faster to get through that part of the video because I wanted to get it out and start editing it so I could start working on the next one. So it's kind of a process that I'm slowly trying to figure out and get better at, and yeah, but just know I worked really hard on it, and I will say this is probably one of the videos that I'm probably the most proud of, to be honest, because again, like, not really knowing what I'm doing when it comes to editing and stuff like that, and really, really diving deep into this case and trying to find everything that I possibly can about it was really important to me. And if you guys are true crime fans, I think you'll know what I'm trying to say here when it comes to this part. But I had a lot of fun diving into this and trying to figure out, like, everything that I could put in this video and making notes on it and doing research. And I hope nobody takes that the wrong way, and I'll go a little bit more into it in a minute here. But I had a lot of fun diving into it, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Obviously, with these cases, I wish they didn't exist. I wish missing persons cases didn't exist, abductions didn't exist, murder cases didn't exist. I wish true crime didn't exist as a whole. And I obviously feel a lot of empathy towards the victims and the families that go through this kind of stuff, and I sympathize with that. And I obviously don't wish that to happen, but being a true crime fan, or a true crime buff or junkie, whatever you want to call it, maybe fan's not the right word for it, but a true crime buff or junkie, however you want to call it, um, I enjoy looking into this stuff. And it's more so, like I said, with the missing persons cases and the murder cases and stuff like that, but especially the missing persons cases. I said this in, I think, my last two videos. It's always been fascinating to me how people can just disappear. I've just, especially with this case, because with Jodi, even though it was by her own hand, it's just crazy to me to think that, like, yeah, she was this big, like, news anchor in Iowa and throughout Minnesota, and she was very well known in those communities and very well known throughout Mason City. And for her to just one day be abducted, and just there's been no trace of her found since then, it was always just very fascinating to me that like that happened. And obviously, like I said, I feel empathy for her. She obviously didn't deserve this. Her family doesn't deserve to go through this over like for over 30 years, 31 years now. And it was just it's a really good, it was a really case, it was always one of those cases that really stuck with me, and I really wanted to cover it again. And again, I'll touch back into what I said. I think a lot of things, when it comes to those of us who are into true crime, I think a lot of us are kind of misunderstood. Because you look at the world today, and it's gotten so much more different in the last 10 or 15 years. Uh, you say the wrong, like you say something that somebody doesn't agree with, or you have a differing opinion, or whatever, people take it the wrong way, and people have their own opinion, and if you don't agree with theirs, or you don't agree with something that they support, you're the bad guy. And it's like, I think a lot of us are misunderstood when it comes to true crime. I'm just going to take a sip of water and then I'll get back to my thought. But I think a lot of us are misunderstood for true crime, for being true crime junkies or passionate about true crime or whatever. And I think a good example of this is with the Dahmer show, the um, Ed Gein show, the numerous documentaries and stuff that's made about that stuff. If you've been following that stuff for a while, you kind of see a lot of people on Twitter and a lot of people on the internet in different places of the internet come out and say, "Oh, you're glorifying them," or "You're a sick person because you look up this stuff," and like whatever, just those type of comments. And I don't look at it like that. I don't look at every true crime fan or even all true crime fans as people who get off on looking into these type of cases or looking at crime scene photos. I don't think anybody sits there and looks at a true crime photo and says, "Hey, look at all that blood. Like, could you just imagine how he did this?" Like, no, we have horror movies for that. And with horror movies, that's okay to do. Like, you see Jason Voorhees take an axe to somebody's head, and you were like, "Oh, that was a cool kill," or Art the Clown doing some kind of kill or something like that. And like, there's just blood and gore and all this shit. Like, we have all that to enjoy that. But with true crime, I don't think anybody looks at a crime scene or does anything like that and it enjoys it, because it's not. And if you do enjoy that, like, you definitely have issues. And like I said, I think just a lot of us who enjoy this stuff are very misunderstood by people out there that don't really get it. And it's like, there's not. I never started doing these cases just because I enjoy true crime. Of course, that's a reason for it, but I also started doing them because, well, the main reason of this channel was, like I said, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever it was now. The creators of Unsolved Mysteries were copyright striking channels that were uploading clips from the show, and I didn't think that was right because nobody was trying to make money off them. We're just trying to get the cases out and so that they could be shown. And that's why I started doing this channel, and that's why I do other cases to try to bring awareness to those and get those out. And that's why I did Jodi's case, because I think Jodi's case is very important um, to get out there, because even though this took place 31 years ago in 1995, and we have the technology that we do today, people still go missing. People still get abducted. And you could argue, yeah, the world's a lot more safer than what it was in 1995, but this stuff still happens. And I do wonder if Jodi's abduction could have been prevented if neighbors would have reported to the cops about the knocking on the door that happened a couple of days previously, or hearing that scream from her that morning. Because, like I said, I don't remember the exact time frame now of how long it was from the cop getting there to um, after she was abducted. But it was only a few minutes, I think. So it's like, if they would have heard that scream and then called the cops, like, the cop would have responded like quick, and maybe he could have prevented it. or maybe he at least could have chased after the van or whatever she was abducted in and have been able to stop him and get her back. And I think that just goes to this case is a good example of that, of like, if you hear something like a scream or something like that, or you see somebody getting hurt, call the cops or try to prevent the crime. Like if you have self-defense training or some kind of like martial arts training or something like that, if you're able to, try to stop it. And I think this is one of those cases that, again, it could have been prevented if people would have acted a lot more quicker than they did. And it's tragic. It's super tragic all around. And there's so many cases that I've read and heard of like this, and it's a shame. But I think it's good to keep these type of cases out there, not just for Jodi's family, but also uh, just to keep the story out there and just try to get people to prevent these types of things from happening, even in today's world. And my AC is kicking on, so hopefully, again, you guys don't hear that. And yeah, but yeah, so like I said, this case was something that I really wanted to cover, and I'll get into a little bit of the suspects a little bit again. Um, as I stated in the video, with Chris Revac, I don't believe he was involved. I do think that like he's definitely obviously, I don't blame the cops for looking into him, giving his past with killing and stuff like that. But again, and like I said, it was very it was a big coincidence and very intriguing that like his ex-girlfriend lived in the same dualplex as John Van Cise. But again, like I said in the video, I think it's hard to believe, like it's hard to like really think that like he would stalk Jodi from March or whenever all the way up to June. Like I just have a hard time believing that, unless he waited to find his girlfriend till June, laid eyes on Jodi, and then went after her. Uh, you know, I don't know. But again, I don't think he was involved because, like I said, I just don't think he was that type of a killer that was kind of a, he thought things out well or anything like that. Like I think he acted quickly, and none of his crimes were planned. And like I said, he very well could have been involved, but in my opinion, I don't think he was. John Van Cise, I never brought this up in the original clip because I watched the Hulu series after. I think I did that like when I was in the middle of discussing all these suspects, because Brian Miller Burned obviously is a big focus on that docu series. But with John Van Cise, like I said, I don't think he did it. I just have a hard time believing it. But again, he very well could have. And I mean, whether or not we have the answer to that, um, or whether or not we'll get the answer to that, who knows? I mean, as of right now, whether John Van Cise did it or not, he took that with him to his grave. But there was an incident with Amy Coons and him that I didn't bring up because I think I had already covered him by the time I had watched the episode, because there's 3 episodes of it, and I think that this had gotten towards the end of it. And she had mentioned an incident where he had shown up at a laundromat that she was doing laundry at, and he just stood. He had a bag of clothes in his hand, and I think she was taking out her clothes or maybe putting them in. I don't remember, but he noticed her, and she said that it was very odd that he came to this laundromat because he had never seen her there before, or she had never seen him there before, and apparently he had never been there, and he just stood there at the door just staring at her with this like he was almost like staring through her, and like with just this very intense look on his face, and that frightened Amy, and she like gathered up her clothes and then ran off and left the laundromat. And so she thinks that like with his behavior before and after that, along with that incident, that like he was definitely the guy who did it. Again, in my opinion, I don't think he was. I do think his behavior was a bit odd when it came to Jodi before and after her disappearance, but again, he cooperated with the investigation. He volunteered the information that he was with her the previous night, and he knew he was going to be looked at for that. And he continued to work with investigators up until he left Mason City. And then I don't think they heard from him for like years. And then I think when they did the 2017 search, and then Steve Ridge got into the investigation in 2019 and talked with John and his wife and all that stuff, he continued to work with them after that. And I think a lot of the reason why he left Mason City in the first place, obviously this was a big case. He was going to be looked at as a suspect from it, and I think he just wanted to leave the that town because if he stayed there, he knew that he would continue to be asked about it. I think he just wanted to get away with it, or not get away with it, but get away from it because he had dealt with it for so long. And so, like, that's my thoughts on him. And like I said, Brian Millerburn, I think he is definitely the guy that did it. Now, could he be innocent? Of course. Anybody is guilty or innocent until proven guilty. That's how the law works. But again, I think his behavior is very suspicious, given the fact that, again, like Stacy Steinberg had said, he seemed enamored with Jodi the moment that he met her. And then there's the fact that he had a drinking problem and an anger issues, and there were beer cans found by her, by Jodi, by the dumpster that was by Jodi's apartment that her window overlooked. Obviously, he matched the composite, and I don't think that his ex-wife just said this just because she wanted to get a like get back at him or anything like that. Like, I think she had a very valid reason to say that, and that he was worth looking into. And then, I mean, you look at the timeline, right? He was with Joe. He spent time with Jodi back in the fall, in October, I think it was, and then he continued to. I think he would. I don't know how, like, when like, if he continued contacting her after that or trying to contact her, but he obviously contacted her in June, around the time of her birthday, around the time of his divorce, and obviously, like I said, he would travel for work around different towns in Mason City, and it's very possible that he could have went there that night. Not that night, but he could have went there a couple of nights previous and been that guy that was seen in the parking lot a couple of days or a few days before her abduction. And like I said, with the guy that Jodi was seeing that was outside of state, that nobody really knows his identity other than like Steve Ridge and the cops. Maybe it's possible that Brian was there, and then he saw that because he wanted to have some, like, he wanted to start a relationship with Jodi or something like that, because obviously he had an attraction towards her. And I think seeing that made him jealous. And I think that, along with his divorce and along with just his life spiraling out of control, he started drinking again. And obviously this happened early in the morning. Brian's ex-wife said he would start drinking earlier on in the morning, so I think, in my opinion, he got drunk and decided to abduct Jodi. And what happened to her after that, we obviously don't know right now. She's been declared dead. I think that is most likely the most, like, plausible possibility, because it's been 31 years now. Which again is super sad, and obviously in these cases I always hope for the best outcome and hope that they find the victims alive, but just with Jodi being gone for so long and there's been no trace of her found at all, I think it's very unlikely that she is still alive. And so, I think with that fact with Millerburn, and just the fact with his behavior when he was being questioned by police, and his lip started quivering when he was asked about the van, and just he had no questions, like, it was just very very strange behavior. You think he would be more defensive and about it, and have questions and be more talkative with questions. I mean, like, Sergeant Prochaska said, he was very cooperative during the interview, but like there were certain questions he wasn't fully answering to, where he just sat back and just, like, just stared and stood, like just sat there and stared at the officer. And so I just think that's very suspicious behavior, and I think that's what makes him very like a very good person of interest to really look at heavily. And yeah, so I mean, as of and the other guys, obviously, like I said, they were found. There was no connection between them and Jodi's abduction. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of my little rehash of the suspects. Another thing that I actually came across too, the partial palm print on the Miata. I don't know if that's entirely accurate now because I was watching the Hulu series. Um, when I was watching the Hulu series, I think the last episode they had noted that like the Sergeant Prochaska, who's been working on the case for a long time now, had noted that there was actually a palm print on the light post that was found. And I mean, whether or not that's a full palm print or not, I don't know. And I mean, whether or not there was a palm print on the Miata, again, I'm not sure. That's always been something that I've always heard, and obviously I covered that in this video, and I never heard about the light post or the palm print being on the light post before. But I figured I would cover that in this part of the video too because I figured that was an important part to get out. But again, I don't know if there's been any DNA match to that palm print, but it's to my in my opinion anyway, I think that palm print on the light post is very possible that it could have been from her attacker. And I think if there was a palm print on the Miata, it's very possible that it could have been Jodi's, right? Because she was walking to her car. Maybe it's possible she went to open the door, because I don't know if it was ever revealed whether or not the door was unlocked or not, but I think she went to open the door, and when she went to open the door, that's when she was grabbed. And yeah, so I think that pretty much explains that as well. But yeah, I mean, like I said, this case obviously there was a whole lot to it. I don't even know if I covered everything, but I tried to cover every single thing that I could find and try to be as thorough as I could with it. And I mean, like I said, I mean, I felt that like I was very like almost consumed by this case because over like the last 2 weeks because I really wanted to get it out for today, the 31st anniversary of her abduction, and the 10th anniversary of my video on it. I was really working hard on it, and yeah, it's actually nice to really have it out. So I'm not gonna make this too much more longer, but I just wanted to talk about it a little bit more. And another thing too, when it comes to the video, I thought that it was very important to kind of cover the person that Jodi was and her background and like moving to Mason City and stuff like that. Like I thought that was very important because I don't really see a whole lot of people doing that. And that's not a knock to them because I mean with a lot of people, um, some people do multiple cases in one video. Others they just want to get to the case. But with me, I felt it was important because I wanted to go that extra mile and kind of paint the picture of Jodi's life and illustrate it and her background and stuff like that, and kind of like reveal more about Jodi. And I mean, I'm sure there's much more about her that I didn't put in the video, but I hope you guys like really enjoyed that part because I worked those parts because I really worked hard on those parts. And again, I felt it was very important, and I think a lot of that is inspired by the documentary or the docu series where they were talking about where her niece was talking about the Facebook page Jodi's Hope. And I thought, yeah, like that, because she was saying like it's basically a thing to more so like show the human side of Jodi, but also correct like the wrong um, parts that have been talked about in her case. And I thought that was important. And I never, unfortunately, I didn't really know too much about Jodi's Hope because I never really looked at it or heard about it until the docu series. And I thought, yeah, like that's very important to cover who these people are because, like I said in the video, like Jodi Huisentruit was more than just a missing person. She was more than just a victim. Like she's a daughter. She was a sister, a friend, and So I thought that it was very important to paint that out as well because, like I said, that's just as important as the case. And so I wanted to do something different and kind of really do that the best as I can. And I mean, that's what I try to do, or that's, well, more recently, that's what I've tried to do with all my cases that I've been doing. But I'm definitely going to step up now with more of it. And yeah, I really don't have too much else to say about it. I mean, I've this case or this video. I mean, I pretty much covered everything that I can, and I've given my thoughts and my theories on it, and I've kind of expanded on those just a little bit more in this video for you guys. And I don't want this to be too long because obviously this is at 26 minutes now, and when I add this to the video, it's already going to be an hour. So I don't want to add too much more time and waste any more of your guys' time. Or, well, I mean, you guys probably don't think it's a waste of time if you're watching this, but I don't want to take up too much of your time, should I say. Um, but yeah, I mean, just know that I really worked hard on this video. It was really interesting to me to deep dive into this case and try to get everything out that I can. And as much of a pain in the ass as it was to try to edit it at times, I think I think I did a decent job. Like I said, it's not perfect. I still have things I can improve on and get better at. And I think as I got towards the end of the video, I got a little bit more better at it. I'm sure as you guys viewed it, you could probably see that. And so, um, but I mean, I'm still going to continue to try to work and get better at it. And like I said, I mean, editing really wasn't that bad. The more longer parts of the video, or doing like the editing process, was more so I having to listen to each part of the case that I was putting into the video, and I would have to stop and look for pictures and look for certain videos and make sure that it matches up with what I'm talking about. And so that's what made it long. And then obviously the research was what made it long too. Like I think I spent like probably, I would say, at least an hour doing research and probably an hour doing editing over the last little while, over the last couple of weeks, with each day that I did it. So it definitely took its time, and but overall, I'm very proud of it. I think for the most part, and again, I'm gonna not try to talk too much more longer because I'm almost at 30 minutes here, but yeah, I really enjoyed covering this case a lot. Um, I really do hope that soon that we do find an answer to what happened to Jodi. I hope that we find her remains, and well, not we, but I hope that they find her remains and there can finally be some closure to Jodi's family. Because, like I said, and her friends too, because they've been dealing with this for 31 years, and she was obviously a very special and important part to many people's lives that she knew, and to those who viewed her. And I mean, like I said, it's a dark part of Mason City's history, unfortunately. And so I hope one day they find her, they find the person that did it, and she can be buried. And whoever did it, if they're still alive, they can be arrested and put in jail for whatever they did to her. Um, and yeah, I hope justice is served one day for Jodi Huisentruit and her family because they deserve it for sure, and so do her friends. They deserve it. And yeah, again, I'm not going to make this too much more longer, but I will go through just a little bit more of an ending here before I totally stop talking and end this video for you guys finally. Um, I will put links to the Jodi's Hope Facebook page as well as findjodi.com in the description if you want to go to those links if you want to know more about Jodi or her case. I will put those links in the description. I will put a link to my Twitter if you want to follow me there. Um, we can discuss this case or other cases or whatever you guys want because I'm into a whole lot of other stuff besides true crime. You can also give me suggestions on what cases you would like me to do. If you have any tips on editing, I could certainly use them for sure. So feel free to do that or drop your thoughts in the comment section or any questions or um, any thoughts that you have. Any cases you want to cover, feel free to comment. Feel free to give me a like if you want. I don't monetize these videos. I've never believed in that. I do that. I do this for fun, and just because I have a passion for this kind of stuff. And yeah, I think that's it. But I will say before I close off this video, um, the next case that I want to get into is the case of Chris Benoit, and I've mentioned Chris Benoit, and I will go and give a brief summarization as to who he is for those who don't know him. Um, he was a professional wrestler who wrestled in WWE, and on one weekend, which is the anniversary of it just passed, he took the lives of his wife, his son, and then took his own life. And that has always been a very intriguing case to me ever since it came out. So I think that's the case that I want to cover next, because there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of conspiracy theories and stuff that people have come up with over the years that are just insane. And yeah, so I'm definitely going to cover that next. I don't know when that'll be. There's still some stuff that I got to do, because a lot, like with Jodi's case, I've done the most of it from my iPad, but I have my gaming laptop that I want to do stuff on, but I got to get a proper mic for that. I got to install some editing stuff on there, and there's some stuff that's saved on this, like my intro and stuff like that, that I have to put on that. So I don't know exactly when that's going to be, but I will eventually start working on it. I don't know when I'm going to start working on it. Probably after this video. I will take a little bit of a break for a little bit, maybe a few weeks or something like that. And then I will probably start working on that video. I don't know when it'll come out. Um, Again, I have no set schedule. I don't really know, especially with editing and stuff like that, and that taking a lot longer than when I was just kind of talking in front of the camera like this. It takes a bit more longer of a process, so I would probably say, I don't know, like I said, I mean, maybe a month or two, maybe that'll come out, but I do want to get that out, and I do want to start working on it. And again, I really do appreciate everybody for watching and supporting me and viewing these videos, because I mean, you guys fuel me to continue to do this, and I've always said, as long as people keep watching, I will keep making these videos. And yeah, I just want to say thank you, and I won't continue to talk anymore because this video is longer than what I intended it to be. But I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you subscribe and that you continue to watch. If you want to look at my older videos, some of them aren't the best, to be honest, because again, I didn't know what I was doing a lot of the times, but I'm trying to get better now at doing this. And yeah, so like I said, if you want to share, subscribe. I'm not going to keep repeating myself over and over again because that gets kind of repetitive. But yeah, thank you again for watching, and I do want to say, um, yeah, stay tuned for more. And yeah, as I always say, I'll see you in the next one.